5,000 years before the word democracy was ever spoken, someone on a windswept Aegean island carved a human face from white marble, smooth and featureless, eyes closed as if dreaming a civilization into existence. That figurine still survives, and so does the civilization it foreshadowed. No other culture on Earth can trace an unbroken thread from the Neolithic age to a modern European capital, yet Greece does exactly that, carrying memory across 5 millennia of reinvention, catastrophe, and rebirth. This is the complete story. It begins with the first farmers who settled the rocky hillsides of Thessaly more than 8,000 years ago, moves through the labyrinthine palaces of Minoan Crete and the warrior citadels of Mycenae, descends into a dark age that erased writing itself, and then rises again into something the world had never seen: the polis, the citizen, the philosophical question asked freely in an open agora. It follows hoplites into the pass at Thermopylae, watches marble being lifted onto the Parthenon under Pericles, and then traces the long unraveling of brother fighting brother until Macedon reshapes everything. Alexander carries the Greek tongue to the Indus. Rome absorbs the Greek world but is transformed by it. Constantinople preserves Hellenic thought for 1,000 years behind its walls. Ottoman conquest buries but does not destroy. And in 1821, revolution resurrects a nation that consciously claims the ancient inheritance. This story still matters because the frameworks born in these rocky landscapes, democracy, philosophy, theatre, scientific inquiry, remain the architecture of modern thought. Greece is not a relic. It is a living argument that civilizations can fall, forget, and still find their way back. If you value complete journeys through the full lifespan of civilizations, subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Each week, we bring you the entire arc of a world that shaped history. Let us begin where all of it began, with stone, sea, and silence. Long before the word Greece held any meaning, before any temple rose on any hill, the Aegean basin lay open to the slow rhythms of geological time. Islands scattered like broken stone across blue water. The mainland thrust its mountains southward into the sea. And on these rocky shores, sometime around 6,500 years before the Common Era, the first farming communities took root. The settlement at Sesklo, in the fertile plain of Thessaly, stands among the earliest. Low mud-brick houses cluster on a hillside, their walls plastered smooth and painted in red and white geometric patterns. Grain storage pits hold emmer wheat and barley. Sheep and goat bones accumulate in middens. The people here have crossed from Anatolia or arrived through long chains of migration, carrying with them the Neolithic revolution, the knowledge that land can be worked, that animals can be kept, that permanence is possible. Nearby, at Dimini, a later settlement rises in concentric stone walls around a central megaron, suggesting hierarchy, defense, the first stirrings of organized authority. For thousands of years, these communities multiply across the mainland and the islands. They shape clay into vessels, carve bone into tools, and bury their dead with simple offerings. The Aegean becomes a world of coastal villages connected by short sea crossings, each community adapting to its particular landscape. The thin soils of the Cycladic islands, the broader valleys of Crete, the sheltered harbors of the eastern mainland. Around 3,200 years before the Common Era, something remarkable emerges in the Cyclades. On islands like Naxos, Paros, and Syros, artisans begin carving figures from local white marble, flat, elongated forms with folded arms and featureless faces tilted slightly upward. Some stand no larger than a hand. Others reach nearly life-size. Their purpose remains uncertain. Grave goods, perhaps, or representations of some unnamed divinity. But their stark abstraction speaks of a culture that has moved beyond mere survival into symbolic thought. Cycladic settlements show evidence of metalworking in copper and silver, of long-distance exchange in obsidian from the volcanic island of Melos, of specialized craft production that implies surplus and trade. Yet it is on Crete, the largest of the Aegean islands, that the most extraordinary transformation unfolds. By 1950 years before the Common Era, the first palace complex rises at Knossos, not a fortress but a labyrinthine administrative center, its corridors opening onto light wells and storage magazines, its columns tapering downward and painted deep red. Similar complexes appear at Phaistos, Malea, and Zakros. These are the centers of Minoan civilization, named by later archaeologists after the mythical king Minos, though no one knows what these people called themselves. The Minoans develop a script, Linear A, that remains undeciphered, its language unknown. Their frescoes depict a world of extraordinary vitality, dolphins arcing through blue water, young athletes leaping over the horns of charging bulls, women in elaborate flounced skirts presiding over ritual gatherings. Their harbors faced south toward Egypt and east toward the Levantine coast. Minoan pottery and metalwork appear in the Nile Delta. Egyptian stone vessels and scarabs turn up in Cretan tombs. A trade network of remarkable sophistication links Crete to the wider Bronze Age world. Around 1628 years before the Common Era, the volcanic island of Thera erupts with catastrophic force, burying the Minoan settlement at Akrotiri under meters of ash and pumice, sending tsunamis crashing against the northern coast of Crete. The palaces survive this disaster and are rebuilt, but Minoan civilization has entered its final centuries. New influences are arriving from the Greek-speaking mainland, where a different kind of power is rising, one built not on trade and ritual, but on war, gold, and the authority of warrior kings behind walls of unmovable stone. Those walls of unmovable stone rise on a rocky citadel in the northeastern Peloponnese, where the plain of Argos opens toward the sea. Mycenae, the place that will give its name to an entire civilization, first announces its power through death. Around 1600 years before the Common Era, a dynasty of warrior rulers begins interring its dead in deep shaft graves cut into bedrock within a circular enclosure. The bodies lie surrounded by staggering wealth, gold diadems, inlaid bronze daggers depicting lion hunts, amber beads from the Baltic, amethyst from Egypt, and thin gold masks pressed over the faces of the dead. One mask, hammered into the likeness of a bearded man with closed eyes, will become the most famous artifact of the Aegean Bronze Age. These burials reveal a society already commanding long-distance trade and projecting martial authority through conspicuous display. The Mycenaeans speak an early form of Greek. Their world is not one kingdom, but a constellation of independent palace centers: Mycenae, Tiryns, Pylos, Thebes, Orchomenos, Iolkos, each ruled by a figure the Linear B tablets will later call the Wonax, a supreme king presiding over a rigidly hierarchical administration. Below the Wonax stands the Lauagetas, a military commander, and beneath both extends a bureaucracy of scribes, landholders, and craft specialists whose activities are recorded on clay tablets in meticulous detail. By 1450 before the Common Era, Mycenaean influence reaches Crete itself. The palace at Knossos comes under mainland control, and the administrative script shifts from the undeciphered Linear A to Linear B, the earliest written form of the Greek language, deciphered only in 1952 by Michael Ventris. These tablets reveal no poetry, no myth, no history. They are inventories. So many jars of olive oil, so many bronze ingots, so many sheep allocated to named shepherds, so many sets of chariot wheels in storage. The palace economy functions as a centralized redistribution system of extraordinary precision. The citadels themselves grow ever more imposing. At Tiryns, walls of Cyclopean masonry, limestone boulders so massive that later Greeks believed only giants could have moved them, enclose a palace complex with painted megaron halls, columned courtyards, and corbelled galleries within the walls themselves. At Mycenae, the Lion Gate rises around 1250 before the Common Era, its massive lintel topped by a relief of two heraldic lions flanking a column. The oldest monumental sculpture in Europe. Behind these defences, the megaron serves as throne room and ceremonial hearth, its floor painted, its walls frescoed with processions and battle scenes. Mycenaean warriors wear bronze cuirasses, greaves, and boar tusk helmets, assembled from dozens of curved tusks sewn onto leather caps. They fight from chariots and on foot with spear and figure-8 shield. Their reach extends across the eastern Mediterranean. Mycenaean pottery appears in Cyprus, the Levantine coast, Egypt, southern Italy, and Sardinia. They established trading posts and possibly colonies. The story of a great expedition against Troy, preserved centuries later in Homeric epic, may echo genuine Mycenaean military ventures along the Anatolian coast. Then, between roughly 1200 and 1100 before the Common Era, this world burns. Palace after palace is destroyed. Pylos first, its archive of Linear B tablets baked hard by the very fire that consumed the building. Mycenae, Tiryns, Thebes, all show evidence of violent destruction or abandonment within decades. The causes remain debated. Incursions by the mysterious sea peoples documented in Egyptian records, prolonged drought revealed by climate data, internal rebellion against palatial elites, disruption of the trade networks upon which the palaces depended, or some cascading combination of all these pressures. What is certain is the totality of the collapse. Writing vanishes, monumental building ceases, population drops sharply, trade networks disintegrate. The elaborate administrative systems that organized thousands of workers and distributed resources across entire regions simply cease to exist. The Aegean world enters a period of profound silence, no inscriptions, no palaces, no kings whose names survive. The citadels stand empty, their cyclopean walls too massive to dismantle, monuments to a power that memory will transform into legend. The silence lasts for generations. Across the Aegean world, the great citadels stand as hollow shells, their throne rooms open to rain and wind, their storehouses empty, their scribes gone, and their scripts forgotten. No one writes, no one builds in dressed stone. The population of the Greek mainland falls by perhaps 75% over the century following 1100 before the Common Era. Villages shrink to clusters of mud brick houses sheltering a few dozen families. The elaborate networks that once moved copper from Cyprus, tin from the west, gold from Egypt, and ivory from the Levant have dissolved entirely. What remains is local, small and quiet, communities turned inward, surviving on subsistence agriculture and herding across a landscape dotted with ruins they can no longer explain. Yet within this apparent emptiness, transformation is already underway. The collapse of palatial bronze-working monopolies forces adaptation. Iron ore, abundant in Greek soils and requiring no long-distance trade for tin, becomes the metal of necessity. Blacksmiths in scattered settlements learn to smelt and forge it, first crudely, then with increasing skill. Iron axes clear land more efficiently. Iron plowshares bite deeper into rocky soil. Iron weapons become available to any man who can afford a smith's labor, not only to palace-equipped warriors. This democratization of metal reshapes social possibility in ways no one yet perceives. At Lefkandi on the island of Euboea, around 950 before the Common Era, a community buries a warrior and a woman in an enormous apsidal building nearly 50 meters long, a structure of mud brick and timber that rivals anything built since the palaces fell. The man's ashes rest in a bronze amphora from Cyprus, wrapped in cloth, accompanied by an iron sword and spearhead. Beside him lies the woman, adorned with gold jewelry. Horses are sacrificed at the building's entrance. Then the entire structure is deliberately buried beneath a massive earthen mound. This is no palace economy. This is a chieftain's world, local power expressed through conspicuous burial, gift exchange, and personal prestige rather than bureaucratic control. Pottery tells the story of slow aesthetic recovery. The wild exuberance of Mycenaean decoration gives way first to sub-Mycenaean simplicity, then to the disciplined geometry of proto-geometric style, precise circles drawn with compass and multiple brush, concentric semicircles, clean bands of dark glaze on light clay. By the 9th century, the full geometric style emerges, meticulous patterns of meanders, zigzags, checkerboards, and eventually human figures rendered as angular silhouettes. Funerary scenes appear on massive amphoras marking graves in the Kerameikos cemetery at Athens, processions of mourners, the deceased laid out on a bier, chariots and warriors. Art is returning to narrative. Around 800 before the Common Era, Greek merchants trading at the Levantine port of Al-Mina encounter Phoenician script, a consonantal alphabet of 22 signs. The Greeks adapt it with a revolutionary modification. They repurpose certain Phoenician consonant signs that represent sounds absent in Greek to denote vowels. Alpha, epsilon, iota, omicron, upsilon. For the first time in history, a writing system captures both consonants and vowels with individual signs. Literacy returns to the Aegean, but in a form radically different from the palace monopoly of Linear B. This alphabet is simple enough for any trader, any craftsman, any poet to learn. And poets there are. Across the 8th century, oral traditions preserved through generations of singers crystallize into monumental form. The Iliad and the Odyssey, attributed to Homer and composed around 750 to 700 before the Common Era, gather centuries of memory, of Mycenaean warfare, of sea voyaging, of aristocratic values, into hexameter verse of extraordinary power. These poems become the shared cultural inheritance of every Greek community, a common reference point that binds speakers of related dialects into something approaching a shared identity. Simultaneously, the polis begins to coalesce. Communities organize around a central gathering place, an agora, and a defensible high point, an acropolis. They develop shared cults, communal decision-making, and a sense of collective citizenship distinct from mere residence. In 776 before the Common Era, athletes from across the Greek world gather at Olympia for games held in honor of Zeus, the earliest fixed date in Greek chronological tradition. The polis is not yet fully formed, but its essential architecture, citizen assembly, shared sacred space, competitive public life, is emerging from the darkness into a new and unprecedented light. By the 7th century before the Common Era, the polis has ceased to be a tentative experiment and become the dominant form of Greek political life. Across the Aegean world, hundreds of independent communities, some numbering only a few thousand citizens, others swelling toward tens of thousands, define themselves through shared laws, common sanctuaries, and the radical principle that governance belongs not to a distant palace, but to the community itself. Yet this principle is fragile, contested, and nowhere settled into a single form. The Archaic Age is an era of constitutional invention conducted through crisis. The first crisis is violence. In communities governed by aristocratic clans, blood feuds and arbitrary justice threaten civic cohesion. The response emerges in written law. At Athens in 621 before the Common Era, a figure named Draco codifies existing legal custom into public inscriptions, harsh penalties, but visible ones. The laws are carved in stone and displayed where any citizen can read them. The act itself matters more than the content. Law becomes communal property rather than aristocratic privilege. Similar codifications appear across the Greek world, at Gortyn on Crete, at Locri in southern Italy, each asserting that the community's rules stand above any single family's power. But written law alone cannot resolve the deeper tension between landed aristocrats and a growing class of indebted farmers. At Athens, the crisis reaches breaking point by the early 6th century. Peasants who cannot repay debts lose their land, their freedom, even their bodies, sold into slavery abroad. In 594 before the Common Era, the Athenians appoint Solon as archon with extraordinary powers to reform the state. He cancels existing debts, forbids the enslavement of Athenian citizens for debt, and reorganizes political participation according to wealth rather than birth alone. 4 property classes replace the old aristocratic monopoly. Solon does not create democracy. The lowest class cannot hold office, but he establishes the principle that political rights derive from civic contribution rather than bloodline. Elsewhere, different solutions prevail. At Sparta, a system of extraordinary rigidity takes shape across the 7th and 6th centuries. 2 hereditary kings share military command. 5 annually elected ephors check royal power. A council of elders proposes legislation. An assembly of full citizens, the homoioi, the equals, ratifies or rejects. Beneath this structure lies the brutal foundation, a vast population of helots, conquered Messenians reduced to serfdom, whose labor feeds the Spartan citizen body. Every Spartan male enters the agoge at age 7, a state-directed training regime of physical hardship, communal living, and martial discipline that produces the most feared infantry in the Greek world. At Corinth, at Sicyon, at Megara, and across the Aegean, a different political phenomenon emerges: tyranny. The word carries no moral judgment in this era. It simply means sole rule seized outside constitutional norms. Tyrants typically arise from the aristocracy itself, exploiting popular discontent against rival nobles. At Athens, Pisistratos seizes power in 561 before the Common Era, loses it, regains it, and rules until his death in 527. Under his patronage, Athens flourishes. Monumental temples rise on the Acropolis. The Panathenaic festival gains splendor. Homeric recitations are formalized, and the city's black figure pottery workshops export their wares across the Mediterranean. Yet tyranny carries its own instability. When Peisistratos's sons prove less capable, Athenian aristocrats and Spartan intervention topple the regime in 510. From the ensuing factional chaos, Cleisthenes emerges in 508 before the Common Era, with reforms more radical than anything Solon attempted. He reorganizes the citizen body into 10 new tribes, cutting across old regional and kinship loyalties, creates a council of 500 chosen by lot, and establishes the principle that every male citizen participates directly in legislative decisions. This is democratia, the power of the demos, and though it excludes women, slaves, and foreigners, it represents an unprecedented experiment in collective self-governance. The Archaic Age closes with the Greek world poised between oligarchy, democracy, and military discipline. A constellation of fiercely independent polis, each convinced its own constitution represents the best possible ordering of human community. The storm gathers in the east. Across the Aegean, beyond the island chains where Greek colonists have planted their cities along the Anatolian coast, the Achaemenid Persian Empire stretches from the Indus to the Nile, the largest political entity the world has yet known. Its king of kings, Darius I, rules over dozens of peoples, commands armies numbering in the hundreds of thousands, and administers his realm through a network of satrapies connected by royal roads. The Greek cities of Ionia, Miletus, Ephesus, Phocia, and others have lived under Persian suzerainty since Cyrus the Great conquered Lydia in 546 before the Common Era. They pay tribute, accept Persian-backed tyrants, and chafe under the arrangement. In 499 before the Common Era, Aristagoras of Miletus ignites revolt. The Ionian cities expel their tyrants and appeal to mainland Greece for aid. Sparta refuses. Athens and Eretria send ships, 20 from Athens, 5 from Eretria, a modest force that joins the rebels in burning Sardis, the satrapal capital. The gesture is brief. The Athenians withdraw after a single campaign season. But Darius does not forget. The Ionian revolt grinds on until 494, when the Persian fleet crushes the Greek naval force at Lade and Miletus falls. Its population is killed or enslaved. The revolt's failure demonstrates Persian military supremacy, yet it has planted something dangerous, the knowledge that Greeks dared to strike, and that Darius now has cause to look westward. Persian heralds arrive on the Greek mainland demanding earth and water, tokens of submission. Many cities comply. Athens and Sparta do not. The Athenians throw the heralds into a pit. The Spartans cast theirs into a well. In 490 before the Common Era, a Persian expeditionary force of perhaps 25,000 troops crosses the Aegean under the generals Datis and Artaphernes. They sack Eretria on Euboea, enslaving its population, then land on the coastal plain of Marathon, 26 miles northeast of Athens. The plain stretches between mountains and sea, marshy at its edges, firm enough at center for cavalry maneuver. The Athenians march out with roughly 10,000 hoplites. A small contingent from Plataea, perhaps 1,000 men, joins them. No Spartan force arrives. The Spartans claim a religious festival prevents their departure until the full moon. The Athenian general Miltiades persuades his fellow commanders to attack rather than wait. The Greek phalanx advances at a run across the final distance, closing the gap before Persian archers can shatter their formation. The center thins deliberately while the wings strike hard, enveloping the Persian flanks. The engagement lasts perhaps an hour. 192 Athenians fall. Persian losses number over 6,000. The survivors scramble to their ships. Marathon transforms Athens. The victory proves that Persian infantry can be defeated by disciplined citizen soldiers in heavy armor. A burial mound still rises on that plain, the Soros, covering the Athenian dead where they fell. The city's confidence swells, and a new leader emerges. Themistocles, who argues that Athens' future lies not in hoplite warfare, but at sea. He persuades the assembly to invest a windfall from the Laurian silver mines into building a fleet of 200 triremes, sleek warships powered by 170 oarsmen arranged in 3 tiers. By 480 before the Common Era, Athens possesses the largest navy in Greece. It is needed. Darius dies in 486, and his son Xerxes inherits both the throne and the unfinished business of punishing Greece. Xerxes assembles an invasion force of staggering scale. Ancient sources claim millions. Modern estimates suggest between 100,000 and 300,000 troops, supported by over 1,000 warships. A bridge of boats spans the Hellespont. A canal is cut through the Athos Peninsula to spare the fleet from dangerous coastal waters. In the spring of 480, this army begins its march south through Thrace and Macedon, absorbing submission from every Greek state in its path. The earth itself seems insufficient to carry what approaches, a convergence of peoples from across 3 continents, marching toward a handful of narrow passes and island straits, where geography might yet favor the outnumbered defenders. They meet the storm at the narrow places. At Thermopylae in the late summer of 480, a small Greek force under the Spartan king Leonidas holds the coastal pass for 3 days against the full weight of Xerxes' army. The pass is barely wide enough for a wagon track between the cliffs and the sea, and here the Persian numerical advantage dissolves against disciplined hoplites fighting in rotation. When a local traitor reveals a mountain path that allows the Persians to encircle the defenders, Leonidas dismisses most of the allied contingents and remains with 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians, and 400 Thebans to die in a rearguard action that buys time for the Greek fleet and the retreating armies. The sacrifice is total. It is also transformative, a demonstration that Persian power can be resisted, that flesh and bronze can hold against empire. The fleet fights simultaneously at Artemisium, where Athenian triremes under Themistocles engage the Persian navy in inconclusive but costly exchanges. When Thermopylae falls, the fleet withdraws south. Athens lies open. The city is evacuated, women, children, and the elderly ferried to Salamis, Troezen, and Aegina. Xerxes' army enters an empty Athens and burns the temples on the Acropolis, reducing the archaic sanctuaries to blackened limestone and shattered terracotta. But the war's decisive moment comes on water. In the narrow straits between Salamis and the Attic mainland, in late September of 480, Themistocles lures the Persian fleet into confined waters, where their superior numbers become a liability. The Greek triremes, lighter, more maneuverable, crewed by men fighting for their own shores, ram and shatter the Persian vessels in hours of close combat. Xerxes watches from a throne set on the shore as his fleet disintegrates, He withdraws to Asia with the bulk of his army, leaving his general Mardonius with a substantial land force to complete the conquest the following year. That completion never comes. In the summer of 479, a united Greek army of perhaps 40,000 hoplites, the largest such force ever assembled, meets Mardonius on the plains near Plataea in Boeotia. The Spartans under the regent Pausanias anchor the Greek right wing. After days of maneuvering and skirmishing, the decisive engagement unfolds when Spartan and Tegean hoplites crash into the Persian infantry. Mardonius falls, his army breaks. On the same day, tradition holds, the Greek fleet crosses the Aegean and destroys the remnants of Persian naval power at Mycale on the Anatolian coast. The double victory of 479 ends the existential threat. Persia does not invade again. The Greek world emerges from the crisis transformed, not unified, for the polis remain fiercely independent, but possessed of a shared memory of resistance that will echo through centuries of literature, art, and political rhetoric. Sparta's infantry has proven supreme on land. Athens' navy has proven decisive at sea. These two facts will shape everything that follows. Within months of Plataea, the alliance begins to fracture along precisely this division. Sparta, conservative and continental, withdraws from aggressive pursuit of the war. Athens, maritime and ambitious, steps forward to lead the Ionian Greeks and island states who wish to continue offensive operations against Persia, to liberate Greek cities still under Persian control, to secure the Aegean sea lanes, to exact revenge. In the winter of 478, representatives from Athens and the maritime allies gather on the sacred island of Delos. They swear oaths over iron weights cast into the sea. The alliance will endure until the iron floats. Each member contributes either warships or an annual tribute in silver, assessed by the Athenian statesman Aristides, called the Just for his reputation of fairness. The treasury is housed in Apollo's sanctuary on Delos. Command of the combined fleet belongs to Athens. This is the Delian League, in name a voluntary alliance of equals against Persia. In practice, the foundation upon which Athens will construct an empire unprecedented in Greek history, transforming tribute into marble, naval dominance into political supremacy, and collective defense into singular glory. The long walls stretch like stone arms from Athens to the sea, enclosing a corridor 4 miles in length that connects the city to its port at Piraeus. These parallel fortifications, completed in the mid-5th century, embody a strategic calculation that Athens need never fight on land so long as the fleet commands the waters and grain ships from the Black Sea continue to arrive. Behind those walls, 250,000 people crowd into a space designed for far fewer. The calculation holds until it does not. In the spring of 431 before the Common Era, war comes. The immediate cause is a dispute over Corcyra and Potidæa. But the deeper cause is structural. Sparta and its Peloponnesian allies can no longer tolerate Athenian imperial expansion. Thucydides, the Athenian general who will become the war's great historian, identifies the truest reason: the growth of Athenian power and the fear this inspired in Sparta. The Peloponnesian War will consume the Greek world for 27 years. Pericles' strategy is one of restraint. The Athenians withdraw behind their walls each summer while Spartan hoplites ravage the countryside of Attica, burning olive groves and trampling grain fields. The fleet strikes at Peloponnesian coastal towns. It is a war of patience against pride. But in the second summer, 430 before the Common Era, a plague enters Piraeus aboard a ship from Egypt or North Africa. It tears through the overcrowded city with devastating speed. Thucydides, himself a survivor, describes the symptoms: violent fever, inflammation of the eyes and throat, pustules on the skin, unquenchable thirst. Perhaps a quarter of the population dies over 4 years, including Pericles himself in 429. The plague does not merely kill bodies. It corrodes civic trust, religious piety, and the social fabric that holds democratic institutions together. The war grinds on without Pericles' steadying hand. Demagogues rise. Cleon, aggressive and populist, pushes for harsher terms against rebellious allies. At Mytilene in 427, Athens debates whether to execute the entire male population of a revolted city. The assembly reverses its decision by a narrow margin, and a second trireme races through the night to countermand the order of massacre. The empire reveals its nature more nakedly now. At Melos in 416, the Athenians present the conquered islanders with a blunt ultimatum: submit or die. The men are killed, the women and children enslaved. 1 year later, Athens commits its most catastrophic error. In 415, the assembly votes to send a massive expedition against Syracuse in Sicily. 200 triremes, thousands of hoplites, the largest armada Athens has ever launched. The strategic logic is grandiose: conquer Sicily's grain wealth and outflank Sparta entirely. But the expedition is plagued from the start. Alcibiades, its brilliant but unreliable champion, is recalled on charges of sacrilege and defects to Sparta. The siege of Syracuse stalls. Reinforcements arrive too late. In the harbor of Syracuse in 413, the Athenian fleet is trapped and destroyed. The retreating army is hunted down in the river valleys. 7,000 survivors are imprisoned in the stone quarries of Syracuse, where most die of exposure and disease. Athens has lost 200 ships, tens of thousands of men, and its aura of invincibility. The empire begins to fracture. Allied states revolt. Persia, sensing opportunity, funds Spartan naval construction. The war's final phase plays out in the eastern Aegean, where Lysander, a Spartan admiral of ruthless competence, builds a fleet with Persian gold. At Aegospotami in 405, Lysander catches the Athenian fleet, beached and unprepared on the Hellespont shore. He captures nearly the entire force. Athens is cut off from its grain supply. By the spring of 404, the city is starving. The long walls are torn down to the music of flutes as Spartan allies celebrate. Athens surrenders unconditionally. The fleet is reduced to 12 ships. An oligarchy of 30 pro-Spartan collaborators seizes power, executing 1,500 citizens in 8 months of terror before democracy is restored in 403. The city survives, diminished but alive. Yet the classical world that Pericles knew has been broken beyond repair. The exhaustion runs deep. Sparta's hegemony, purchased with Persian gold and Lysander's ruthlessness, proves brittle. Spartan garrisons occupy Greek citadels. Spartan harmosts govern with contempt. Within a decade, former allies turn hostile. Thebes rises under Epaminondas, whose oblique order tactics shatter Spartan invincibility at Leuctra in 371. The sacred band of Thebes, 300 paired warriors, drives through the Spartan right wing and kills their king Cleombrotus. For 9 years, Theban supremacy reshapes the Peloponnese. Messenia is liberated, Megalopolis founded as a counterweight to Sparta. But at Mantinea in 362, Epaminondas falls in the moment of victory, and Theban power dies with him. The Greek world has no hegemon. Every major polis is weakened, its treasuries drained, its citizen armies depleted by decades of continuous warfare. Into this vacuum steps a kingdom the southern Greeks have long dismissed as half-barbarian. Macedon lies north of Thessaly, a broad land of timber forests, horse pastures, and gold-bearing rivers. Its people speak a Greek dialect, worship Greek gods, and compete at Olympia. Yet the polis of the south regard them as peripheral, their monarchy as primitive. In 359, a young prince named Philip takes the throne at age 23, inheriting a kingdom beset by pretenders and foreign threats. He has spent 3 years as a hostage in Thebes, observing Epaminondas' military innovations at close range. He returns to Macedon with a vision. Philip's reforms are systematic and devastating in their eventual effect. He transforms the Macedonian infantry from a feudal levy into a professional force. The foot companions carry the sarissa, a pike of 18 feet, nearly twice the length of a standard hoplite spear. Arrayed in dense formations 16 ranks deep, the sarissa phalanx presents an impenetrable hedge of iron points, while the rear ranks add weight and momentum. The companion cavalry, drawn from Macedonian nobility, trains to deliver shock charges on the oblique, striking enemy flanks, while the phalanx pins them in place. Philip integrates siege engineers, light infantry, and allied contingents into a combined arms system no Greek state has assembled before. Gold from the mines of Mount Pangaion, captured in 356, finances this army year-round. Philip pays his soldiers through winter, keeping them trained and available for spring campaigns. He moves with extraordinary diplomatic cunning, bribing where he cannot conquer, marrying strategically, exploiting rivalries between Greek states. He takes Amphipolis, Potidaea, Olynthus. He intervenes in the sacred wars over Delphi, positioning himself as defender of Apollo's sanctuary. Demosthenes thunders warnings in Athens, delivering his Philippics to an assembly that vacillates between alarm and complacency. By 338, Philip has maneuvered Athens and Thebes into a desperate alliance against him. They meet at Chaeronea in Boeotia on an August day. The Macedonian left, commanded by Philip's 18-year-old son Alexander, faces the sacred band. The battle unfolds with precision. Philip feigns retreat on his right, drawing the Athenian line forward and opening a gap. Alexander's cavalry charges through the breach. The sacred band, surrounded, fights to annihilation. All 300 fall where they stand. Greek independence, as the classical polis understood it, ends on this field. Philip organizes the conquered states into the League of Corinth, binding them as allies under Macedonian leadership for a declared war against Persia. He is elected hegemon. Preparations advance rapidly. But in 336, at his daughter's wedding celebration in the old capital of Aegae, a bodyguard named Pausanias drives a blade into Philip's chest. The king dies in the theatre he built for the occasion. His tomb, discovered at Vergina in 1977, yields gold wreaths, ivory portraits, bronze armor, and a golden larnax containing his cremated remains. Alexander, now 20 years old, inherits the throne, the army, and the war against Persia. Within 2 years he crosses the Hellespont with nearly 40,000 men. The world he enters will never be the same. Alexander dies in Babylon in June of 323 before the Common Era, 32 years old, his empire stretching from the Adriatic to the Indus. No clear successor exists. His half-brother Aridaeus is mentally impaired. His unborn son by Roxane will not survive childhood. Within hours of the king's death, his generals begin dividing the world among themselves. The wars of the Diadochi consume 4 decades. Perdiccas, initially regent, is murdered by his own officers in 321. Antigonus One-Eye, the most ambitious of the successors, attempts to reunify the empire by force and is killed at the Battle of Ipsus in 301, his vast territories partitioned among the victors. By 281, when the last of Alexander's original companions falls, the political geography has solidified into distinct kingdoms. Ptolemy and his descendants rule Egypt from Alexandria. Seleucus and his line govern an enormous realm stretching from Anatolia through Mesopotamia to the borders of India. Antigonus's grandson Antigonus Gonatas secures Macedon and much of mainland Greece. Later, the Attalid dynasty carves out a wealthy kingdom centered on Pergamon in western Asia Minor. These are not Greek city-states. They are monarchies on an oriental scale, administered by Macedonian and Greek elites ruling over vast non-Greek populations. Yet they spread Greek language, urban planning, and intellectual culture with extraordinary reach. Seleucus founds Antioch on the Orontes around 300, laying it out on a Hippodamian grid with colonnaded streets, gymnasia, theatres, and temples to both Greek and local deities. Dozens of similar cities rise across Syria, Mesopotamia, and Central Asia. At Ai-Khanoum in modern Afghanistan, archaeologists uncover a Greek theatre, a gymnasium, and Delphic maxims inscribed in stone, thousands of miles from the Aegean. Alexandria becomes the supreme intellectual centre of the Hellenistic world. Ptolemy I establishes the Mouseion, a research institution attached to the royal palace, and the great library that eventually holds hundreds of thousands of papyrus scrolls. Euclid composes his Elements there around 300, systematizing geometry into 13 books that will remain the standard mathematical text for over 2,000 years. Eratosthenes, serving as head librarian in the mid-3rd century, calculates the circumference of the Earth using shadow angles at Alexandria and Syene, arriving within remarkable accuracy of the true figure. Aristarchus of Samos proposes a heliocentric model of the solar system. In Syracuse, Archimedes develops principles of buoyancy, calculates pi, and designs war machines that hold off Roman siege forces for 2 years. The Pharos lighthouse rises on an island at Alexandria's harbour entrance, completed around 280 before the Common Era. Standing perhaps 400 feet tall, faced in white limestone, it becomes one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, its fire visible far out to sea. Philosophy transforms as well. Zeno of Citium founds the Stoic school around 300, teaching in the painted stoa of the Athenian Agora that virtue aligned with reason constitutes the only true good. Epicurus establishes his garden in Athens, arguing that pleasure understood as tranquility and the absence of pain represents the highest aim of life. These schools address individuals navigating vast kingdoms where the intimate political participation of the classical polis has vanished. Hellenistic sculpture abandons the serene idealism of the 5th century. The Laocoon group writhes in agony. The winged victory of Samothrace surges forward on a ship's prow, drapery pressed against her body by invisible wind. The great altar at Pergamon, constructed in the 2nd century, depicts gods and giants locked in combat across a frieze of extraordinary emotional intensity. Yet the political world remains unstable. The Achaean League and Aetolian League attempt to preserve Greek autonomy on the mainland, but their rivalries invite outside intervention. In 215, Philip V of Macedon allies with Hannibal against Rome. It is a fateful miscalculation. Roman legions cross into Greece, defeat Macedon at Cynoscephalae in 197, and declare Greek cities free, a freedom that masks growing dependence. By 168, Macedon is dismembered into 4 republics. In 146, Corinth burns, and Greece becomes a Roman province. The Hellenistic political order ends, but its cultural legacy, its science, its philosophy, its cities, its language has already reshaped the ancient world beyond reversal. The ashes of Corinth settle over a landscape of broken columns and shattered terracotta. In 146 before the Common Era, the Roman consul Lucius Mummius orders the city razed, its men killed, its women and children sold into slavery. It is a calculated act of terror, a message to every Greek city that resistance to Roman authority ends in annihilation. Yet even as the smoke clears, something paradoxical begins. The Roman soldiers who sack Corinth carry home bronze statues, painted vases, and marble reliefs. Their commanders display Greek art in triumphal processions through Rome. The conquerors are already captivated by what they have destroyed. Greece becomes the province of Achaea, administered from the rebuilt city of Corinth, after Julius Caesar refounds it as a Roman colony in 44 before the Common Era. Macedon is a separate province. The Aegean Islands, Crete, and the Greek cities of Asia Minor fall under various administrative arrangements. Political independence is extinguished. Greek cities retain local magistrates and councils, but Roman governors hold ultimate authority, and Roman tax collectors extract tribute from lands that once funded the Parthenon. Yet subjugation produces an extraordinary cultural inversion. Wealthy Romans send their sons to Athens to study philosophy and rhetoric. Cicero studies at the Academy in 79 before the Common Era. The city retains its philosophical schools, the Academy, the Lyceum, the Stoa, the Garden of Epicurus, as living institutions centuries after their founders' deaths. Greek tutors become indispensable in Roman aristocratic households. Greek remains the language of intellectual discourse, scientific writing, and Eastern Mediterranean commerce. The Roman poet Horace captures the paradox. Conquered Greece takes its fierce conqueror captive. Athens itself, though politically diminished, becomes a university city. Its streets fill with students from across the Roman world. The Agora still functions as a civic space, though now adorned with Roman benefactions alongside classical monuments. In the 1st century before the Common Era, Roman generals compete to patronize Greek cities. Pompey endows building projects, Augustus reorganizes provincial administration and grants Athens special status as a free city, exempt from direct taxation. The true flowering of Roman Philhellenism arrives with the Emperor Hadrian in the 2nd century of the Common Era. Hadrian visits Athens multiple times, completing the massive temple of Olympian Zeus, begun 6 centuries earlier under the Pisistrated tyrants, and dedicating it in 132. He constructs a grand library, an aqueduct, and an ornamental arch that marks the boundary between the ancient city and his new quarter. An inscription on the arch reads that this side belongs to the city of Theseus, while the other belongs to the city of Hadrian. Athens receives new civic buildings, expanded fortifications, and imperial attention that restores something of its former grandeur. Greek intellectuals thrive within the Roman system. Plutarch of Chæronea, writing around the turn of the 2nd century, produces his Parallel Lives comparing Greek and Roman statesmen, a work that assumes the essential equivalence of both civilizations. Epictetus, born a slave in Hierapolis, teaches Stoic philosophy in Greek that influences Roman emperors. Marcus Aurelius himself composes his Meditations in Greek during military campaigns along the Danube in the 170s. The language of Homer and Plato has become the interior voice of Roman imperial power. Meanwhile, a new force stirs in the Greek-speaking East. Around the year 50 of the Common Era, a Jewish tentmaker named Paul of Tarsus arrives in Corinth and later addresses Athenians near the Areopagus. He writes his epistles in Greek, the common tongue of the Eastern Mediterranean. Early Christian communities organize in Greek-speaking cities: Thessaloniki, Philippi, Ephesus, Corinth. Their scriptures circulate in Greek. Their theological vocabulary draws on Greek philosophical concepts. The faith spreads through networks that Hellenistic urbanization created centuries earlier. By the 3rd century, Christianity has become deeply rooted in the Greek-speaking provinces, carried by the very language and infrastructure that Alexander's successors built and Rome maintained. The Greek world has lost its political sovereignty, but its language, its thought, and its cultural forms now shape both the empire that rules it and the religion that will eventually transform that empire from within. On the western shore of the Bosporus, where Europe narrows to within sight of Asia, a new city rises. In 330 of the Common Era, the Emperor Constantine dedicates his refounded capital on the site of ancient Byzantion, a Greek colony established nearly 1,000 years earlier. The city he names Constantinople inherits Rome's imperial machinery, but speaks Greek in its markets, prays in Greek in its churches, and thinks in Greek in its schools. Massive walls ring the promontory. A hippodrome seats 80,000. Forums and colonnaded avenues echo the urban grammar of Hellenistic planning. Constantine fills his capital with classical Greek sculpture looted from across the eastern provinces, the serpent column from Delphi, bronzes from Olympia, marble from Athens. This is not merely a new administrative center. It is the transplantation of Greco-Roman civilization into a Christian framework, and it will endure for 11 centuries. The transformation unfolds gradually. Through the 4th and 5th centuries, Latin remains the language of law and military command, but Greek dominates daily life, liturgy, and literature. The population swells past 300,000. The Theodosian walls, completed in 413, create a triple line of fortification that renders the city virtually impregnable by land. When Rome itself falls to Germanic kingdoms in 476, Constantinople stands untouched, the surviving heart of the Roman world, increasingly Greek in character. Under Justinian I, who reigns from 527 to 565, the empire reaches its greatest territorial extent since antiquity. His generals Belisarius and Narses reconquer North Africa, Italy, and southern Spain. But Justinian's most enduring achievement rises in stone and light. The Hagia Sophia, completed in 537 after just 5 years of construction, spans 180 feet from floor to the crown of its dome. 40 windows ring the dome's base, flooding the interior with light that seems to dissolve the structure's mass. Gold mosaics cover every surface. The building represents the supreme synthesis of Greek mathematical knowledge, Roman engineering, and Christian spiritual ambition. By the 7th century, the empire has shed its Latin vestiges. Emperor Heraclius adopts Greek as the sole official language of administration around 620. The empire's enemies press from every direction: Persians from the east, Avars and Slavs from the north, and after 632, Arab armies carrying the new faith of Islam. Syria, Egypt, and North Africa fall permanently to the caliphate. The empire contracts to Anatolia, the Aegean, and fragments of Italy and the Balkans. Yet Constantinople holds. Its walls, its navy armed with Greek fire, a devastating incendiary weapon, and its administrative resilience preserve the Greek Christian state. The iconoclast controversy erupts in 726 when Emperor Leo III orders the destruction of religious images. For over a century, the empire tears itself apart over whether sacred icons constitute idolatry or legitimate devotion. The dispute ends in 843 with the permanent restoration of icon veneration, the triumph of orthodoxy. This resolution defines Byzantine religious identity permanently. The Macedonian dynasty, reigning from 867 to 1056, presides over a cultural and military renaissance. Scholars in Constantinople copy and preserve classical Greek manuscripts, Plato, Aristotle, Thucydides, Euclid, that would otherwise vanish. Emperor Basil II, the Bulgar slayer, extends imperial borders to their greatest medieval reach by 1025, from southern Italy to Armenia, from the Danube to Crete. Constantinople's population approaches 500,000. The city functions as the wealthiest and most sophisticated urban center in the Christian world, its bazaars trading silk, spices, and gold, its monasteries producing illuminated manuscripts of breathtaking precision. Greek civilization has not merely survived the ancient world's collapse, it has reconstituted itself within Orthodox Christianity and imperial governance, carrying forward language, learning, philosophy, and artistic tradition through centuries that see Western Europe struggle to rebuild from fragmentation. But that reconstituted civilization, magnificent in its learning and faith, stands vulnerable. The 11th century's close brings military catastrophe at Manzikert in 1071, where Seljuk Turks shatter Byzantine forces and open Anatolia to Turkish settlement. The empire's heartland, the Greek-speaking agricultural provinces that supply soldiers and grain, begins slipping away. Constantinople's emperors appeal westward for military aid, and what arrives in 1204 is not salvation, but annihilation from within Christendom itself. The Fourth Crusade, diverted from its Egyptian objective by Venetian commercial ambition and Byzantine dynastic intrigue, turns its siege engines against the greatest Christian city on earth. In April of 1204, Crusader knights breach Constantinople's sea walls along the Golden Horn. For 3 days, Latin soldiers sack the city with a ferocity that shocks even medieval chroniclers. Churches are stripped of gold. The hippodrome's bronze horses are crated for shipment to Venice. Libraries burn. Reliquaries are smashed open for their precious metals. The accumulated treasure of 9 centuries of continuous civilization is scattered across Western Europe. A Latin empire is proclaimed on the Bosporus, its Flemish emperor enthroned in the Great Palace. But Byzantine successor states coalesce in exile, at Nicaea in western Anatolia, at Trebizond on the Black Sea coast, at Epirus in northwestern Greece. The Nicaean emperors prove most capable, maintaining Greek administrative traditions and orthodox ecclesiastical authority in a diminished but functional state. In 1261, Michael VIII Palaiologos recaptures Constantinople with a small force, finding the city depopulated and decayed, its population fallen from hundreds of thousands to perhaps 50,000 souls. The restored empire is a shadow. 2 centuries of slow contraction follow as Ottoman Turks consolidate power in Anatolia and cross into Europe. By 1400, the empire consists of little more than Constantinople itself, a few Aegean islands, and the Peloponnese. The city's population dwindles further. Entire neighborhoods stand empty, their houses crumbling into gardens and orchards within the ancient walls. On the 29th of May, 1453, Sultan Mehmed II's massive cannon, cast by the Hungarian engineer Urban, breaches the Theodosian walls near the gate of St. Romanus. Ottoman janissaries pour through the gap. The last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI Palaiologos, dies fighting in the breach, his body never identified. The city that had stood as the capital of Greek Christian civilization for 11 centuries passes under Ottoman sovereignty. Yet Greek civilization does not end. It transforms, adapts, endures. Under the Ottoman millet system, the ecumenical patriarch in Constantinople becomes the administrative head of all Orthodox Christians in the empire, the ethnarch of the rum millet. Greek bishops collect taxes, adjudicate civil disputes, and maintain schools. The church becomes the institutional vessel carrying language, liturgy, and collective memory through generations of political subjugation. In mountain villages of the Peloponnese and Epirus, in island communities across the Aegean, Greek-speaking populations maintain local governance through councils of elders. Monasteries on Mount Athos preserve manuscripts and theological learning behind fortified walls. The Phanariots, wealthy Greek families of Constantinople's Phanar district, rise to positions of influence as translators, diplomats, and administrators within the Ottoman state, governing the Danubian principalities from the early 18th century. Greek merchant communities spread across the Mediterranean and into Central Europe, Odessa, Trieste, Vienna, Venice, accumulating wealth and exposure to Enlightenment ideas. By the 1790s, Rigas Feraios publishes revolutionary pamphlets calling for a Balkan republic, his maps and constitutions circulating in Greek coffeehouses from Budapest to Bucharest. In 1814, 3 Greek merchants found the Feliciateria, the Friendly Society, in Odessa, a secret organization dedicated to armed revolution against Ottoman rule. Across the Greek-speaking world, from mountain clefts who have never submitted to Ottoman authority to educated diaspora intellectuals, the idea crystallizes that political liberation is not merely possible, but inevitable. On the 25th of March, 1821, Germanos, Metropolitan Bishop of Patras, raises the banner of revolt in the Peloponnese. Across the Morea, Greek communities take up arms, farmers, shepherds, clefts who have raided Ottoman supply lines for generations, and merchants who have funded the conspiracy from abroad. Within weeks, the uprising spreads to central Greece, the Aegean islands, and Crete. Ottoman garrisons fall in town after town. The revolution is chaotic, brutal, and magnificent. Yet the struggle proves agonizing. Ibrahim Pasha of Egypt lands in the Peloponnese in 1825 with disciplined forces that devastate rebel-held territory. The siege of Missolonghi, where defenders hold out for over a year before their final desperate breakout in April 1826, becomes a symbol of Greek sacrifice that galvanizes European public opinion. Philhellenes from across the continent volunteer and die alongside Greek fighters. The great powers finally intervene. On the 20th of October, 1827, a combined British, French, and Russian fleet destroys the Ottoman-Egyptian navy at the Battle of Navarino, the last major engagement fought entirely under sail. By 1829, the London Protocol recognizes Greek independence, and in 1832, the Treaty of Constantinople establishes a sovereign Greek kingdom under the Bavarian prince Otto. The new state is tiny, comprising only the Peloponnese, central Greece south of Thessaly, and some islands, with a population under 800,000. Athens, a dusty village of perhaps 4,000 clustered beneath the Acropolis, becomes the capital in 1834. Neoclassical buildings rise along planned boulevards, the university, the National Library, the Royal Palace, a deliberate architectural claim to ancient heritage. The Megali idea, the great national aspiration to unite all Greek-speaking populations within a single state, drives foreign policy for nearly a century. Territorial expansion comes in stages. The Ionian Islands transfer from British protection in 1864. Thessaly is ceded by the Ottomans in 1881. The Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913 bring Thessaloniki, Epirus, Crete, and the eastern Aegean islands into the kingdom, nearly doubling its territory and population. But overreach follows triumph. The Asia Minor campaign of 1919 to 1922 ends in catastrophe. The Greek army's defeat by Kemalist Turkish forces and the burning of Smyrna in September 1922. The subsequent population exchange of 1923 uproots over 1 million Orthodox Christians from Anatolia, flooding Greece with refugees who reshape its demographics, economy, and culture forever. The interwar period brings instability. Republic replaces monarchy in 1924, monarchy returns in 1935, and the Metaxas dictatorship imposes authoritarian rule from 1936. When Axis forces invade in 1941, Greece resists fiercely, but falls under brutal occupation. Famine kills hundreds of thousands in Athens alone during the winter of 1941 to 42. Liberation in 1944 gives way immediately to civil war between communist and royalist forces, lasting until 1949 and leaving deep scars. Recovery comes slowly through the 1950s and 60s, Reconstruction, emigration, tourism's first stirrings. The military junta of 1967 to 1974 suspends democracy until its collapse after the Cyprus disaster. The Third Hellenic Republic, established in 1974, brings stable parliamentary governance. European Economic Community membership follows in 1981, integrating Greece into the continental project. The 2004 Athens Olympics showcase a modernized nation. The debt crisis of the 2010s tests Greek society to its limits, yet the state endures. Today, the Hellenic Republic, 10.4 million people inhabiting a land of limestone mountains, island archipelagos, and olive groves, carries forward a civilizational thread stretching from Neolithic Sesklo to the digital age. The Acropolis glows golden above a European capital at dusk, its marble columns still standing after 24 centuries, testament to a culture that shaped philosophy, democracy, science, art, and the very concept of the citizen. The thread has never broken. Thank you for joining this journey through 5 millennia of Greek civilization. If these stories have moved or informed you, please subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new exploration of the histories that shaped our world.